Completing Massachusetts, December 27th, Sages Ravine, north to Mount Race Viewpoint. We came in from Washington State Park on Garrett Farm Road and followed the signs for the YMCA camp, a summer camp for boys and girls in the Berkshires region of western Massachusetts. This was the first time we were in this park, and it was very beautiful. It even had a small church inside the park. We parked at the end of the road and parked in a parking lot for Camp High Rock. We saw some YMCA cabins here. No one was around as it was the end of December. It was very cold and windy here with some snow flurries. We tried to find a way in near a stream, not knowing if there was a trail here or not. A couple of years ago, when we stayed at Sages Ravine, the caretaker had told us that he came onto the AT from this road near a small stream near Plantain Pond. So we had thought that this road near Plantain Pond was it. After a little searching, we found a path through the wood heading toward the AT. And after about 5 minutes later, we found a white blaze, and we were on the AT. We headed south on the trail toward Sages Ravine, where we had camped over Labor Day weekend. And so I had thought. We passed Bear Rock Falls campsite, which was closed for restoration. This area was very pretty, with ledges and a nice pine area. We passed 4 people going north and reached Laurel Ridge Campground. This was relocated to this location recently. It had a large tent platform and a privy. We reached the ravine and crossed the stream into Connecticut. We finally found the state line for Massachusetts and Connecticut, our second AT state line crossing. The ravine here was spectacular with big waterfalls. We climbed up the ravine on the trail and found more hidden waterfalls off the trail. We reached Sages Ravine campsite and ate on the same tent platform that we had tented in 2005. There were some new signage around the campsite warning of an increase in bear activity in 2006. It said not to leave your site unattended for even a second and to use the bear boxes for your food supply. We headed back and went to the Bear Rock Falls overlook and looked around. This was a camping area, too. A hiker came by us as we were looking at the view, and he said that he had climbed up these cliffs. It was around 3 o'clock, and it gets dark now around 4:30. So we did not have much time left to make it all the way to Mount Race Summit. We decided to hike out another 45 minutes north from where we had entered from the road. My knees were beginning to hurt at this point. We made it to a ledge with a view, a once-in-a-lifetime experience, as we were starting to get some snow flurries up here falling into the valley below. You could see a fog-like drift blowing down into the valley. Dave was loving the snow blowing around up here. It was the nice, fluffy type of snow with big flakes. It was very peaceful, and the mountain view was great. At first, I always get excited about wanting to make the mileage. Then I start to enjoy the views and the peace and quiet. It is always hard to return back to the traffic and noise after the hike. We hope to come back up Racebrook Falls Trail, which we had done over Memorial Day weekend this year, and make it back to this point on the 29th. This was an exciting day with snow flurries. My hands kept freezing, and Dave kept warming them up. We did not see or hear any wildlife today. It must be too cold out for them. December 28th. From the Cobble Trail, north to Vermont-Massachusetts border. We wanted to go up the Cobble Trail from Williamston, Massachusetts, because we had already done the AT up from North Adams to the 98 Trail. We had trouble finding the Cobble Trail because the area was full of a new rich housing development. This trail had been relocated about 1/4 of a mile from where it was on the map. Now, it started in a new housing area on a new road called the Cobble Pine Road. So basically, the road was put over the trail. The trail was across the road from the parking area and had went behind and around very rich houses for about 1/2 a mile before getting into the woods. We reached the 98 Trail and decided to head up the trail and take the Cobble Trail back down on the way back. The trail turned off the Cobble Trail to the left. The trail was long and followed along the ridge. We had met a geology professor from Williamston College. He told us that his class had found a boulder up here that was 98 million years old in this area. The climb went up over lots of loose, small rocks and was getting steeper during the climb. It was getting colder, and the sun had gone into the clouds for the rest of the day. it had become totally overcast with a cold wind. We were beginning to think that we would not reach the AT when we finally reached a junction for a trail. It was a very long and hard climb. At first, we were not sure if it was the AT because we did not see any white blazes. However, a woman walking on the trail had told us that it was the AT. When we had flown out into North Adams and hiked up here in 2004, we had turned around here at the 98 trail. There was no sign here at this junction for the AT. A sign was here, but it was totally faded out. We continued to hike to the Vermont and Massachusetts border because we needed to meet where we were this past November. The snow on the ground was deep, maybe about a half an inch. There was a lot of small and bigger rocks up here that added to the difficulty of walking in this section. And with ice on the trail, it was also making it a very slippery condition. We had reached an area with frozen mud on the trail and knew that we must be getting closer to Vermont. After all, it is not named Vermud by thru hikers for no reason. It lives up to its name, as every time we hike in Vermont, we always find lots of mud on the trail. We had stopped to check the map for the mileage because it seemed to be taking such a long time to reach the border. My knees, my left foot, and right ankle were killing me. The sounds of crunching snow and wind blowing was relaxing. However, the temperatures was getting colder. We finally reached the border, and I signed the register. Our entry was there from November, just one page back. It is always neat to read our entry from the register that we had written in the past. We ate our lunch here. It was so cold now, and the rocks were covered with snow. Dave had stood up the entire lunch break. I sat on the pack, the only dry and soft place. It was a fast lunch, and we headed back. On our way back, we had to stop to help each other warm up each other's hands in the middle of the trail. We hummed it back down on the 98 trail. However, the rocks at the top was granite, and it was covered with ice, and much care was needed going down to reach the cobble trail. It was a very steep descent, which had made it a very slow descent going down. We heard a noise on the way down. I had thought that it was just a dog from the housing development. It was a howling sound. We were about 2 miles from the road. Dave said that it might be kids making the noise. However, it could have been a coyote or even a wolf. We would never know what it was. However, it was only a single noise, so it seems to me that it was more likely it would have been an animal noise. We reached a sign at a trail junction that read, "The Cobble Top, 0.2 miles," and decided to check it out, even though we were in a lot of pain. The view was worth the 0.4 miles out and back. It was a look-out view of the town of North Adams. We could see the top of Mount Greylock and even see the path for the AT going up the next mountain with the clouds going over the mountains. We went back to the 98 trail and had passed some people heading up to the cobble view. It was 3:30 and we saw another man coming up the trail even later. The people we just passed going up had already passed us going down. They must be really moving to make to the view and back down already. We were really moving slowly down with our aches and pains. We finally reached the 98 trail and the housing area again. It was a really long and hard hike, but we are glad that we had connected this section of the trail. We loved the princess pines, the haircap moss at the Vermont line, and also the scrubby pines at the summit of East Mountain was very interesting. At Williamston, when we got back down to the car, there was no snow, and at the Vermont line, there was a half of an inch of snow on the ground, a big difference in just a couple of miles. We saw no wildlife today. We heard some crows and a howling sound. The weather was cloudy, cold, and windy with a dusting of snow on the ground. December 29th, Race Brook Falls Trail to the Viewpoint Pass Mount Race. Today was the first sunny, blue sky day of this trip. We parked at the Race Brook Trail parking lot off of Route 41. We started our climb up to Mount Race. This area is very beautiful, but it is a tough climb. We had gone up this way over Memorial Day this year when we did Mount Everett. The trail passed through a hemlock forest and follows a nice stream up to a spectacular waterfall. We had forgotten how hard this section was. We reached the Race Brook campground. The trail had been relocated in the last 7 months, and it now went right through the campground and climbed up higher. The last time that we were here, it had stayed lower near the stream and under some cliffs. They did a nice job relocating the new trail, and it joined up with the AT in a very pretty pine forest. We had to hike a little north to meet where the Racebrook Falls used to reach the AT. This was a beautiful area in the pines with views of Mount Everett. We turned around and headed back south on the trail and started our climb on the AT up to Mount Everett. It started right off with a climb, however, it went up a little at a time, so it was not that bad. The trail was rocky and went along a cliff with great views. The rocks had some ice on it in some places, and the mud on the trail was frozen. We kept climbing higher and higher and had kept thinking that we were near the top, but it just kept going up. We finally reached the top, and it was beautiful on a rocky ledge and some scrubby pine trees that were just below my knees. Water had frozen in little puddles inside the hole in the ledge. The sun felt warm up here, which was good because it was still very cold out today. We had a beautiful day for the summit, and Mount Race had one of the best views in Massachusetts. The views were wonderful up here, and it followed along the ledge for about 0.5 miles with great views. We had to keep going to meet where we were 2 days ago. When we finally reached the area that we had stopped to eat our lunch on December 29th, Dave said, "Look, there it is." We celebrated our first section of the Appalachian Trail that we had completed by running a roll of toilet paper across the trail between two trees and setting up our cameras to record our first section of the AT completed by walking through and breaking through the toilet paper. Massachusetts is done. This will become our ritual of completing each section of the trail. We headed back a short distance and stopped at the cliffs to eat our lunch. I never wanted this moment to end. The sun was warm and the skies was blue. It was a peaceful and quiet area with good company and the great views. But the sandwich bread was hard. We were glad to have the summit to ourselves. We enjoyed the summit and headed back down to the car. 2 male hikers had ran past us on the way down, and we saw someone else winter camping at the campground. We asked them about their gear. They told us that they had a 4-season tent and winter sleeping bags. We also saw a family heading up with a huge camera around 3:30. We had seen some squirrels but heard no wildlife today. The weather was sunny and cool. We made it to the car at 4:30 just as it was getting dark. It was a beautiful day, one of the best, and we completed our first state, Massachusetts.